Idealism, the unrealistic belief in or pursuit of perfection. In football, it's more accurately described as a stubbornness to change tactical principles due to an unrelenting belief in a specific philosophy. It's often seen in young managers who don't have other tactical systems due to their inexperience and are forced or choose to double down on that style. It's a description that I think is entirely fitting for Ange Postecoglou. In this video, we analyse Postecoglou's time at Tottenham so far, especially this season, where it's gone wrong and whether he can win back favour with the fans. This is why Ange Postecoglou is too idealistic. Alright, let's talk about Postecoglou then. Now I want to take us back to when he first joined Tottenham, because there was this honeymoon period of 10 matches where they weren't unbeaten, they looked incredible, and then I think we saw the first sign of what we're going to talk about today is this idealism that Postecoglou still has, his relentless belief in his own tactics, and he doesn't want to change them up. Let's talk about the Chelsea game. Tottenham won, Chelsea 4. Very famous match for a lot of reasons, but one was the absurdity of the high line Tottenham played once they were down to 9 men. Sorry, not even 10 men, 9 men. They went for a very high line. They tried to catch Chelsea out. They ended up conceding quite a few goals, but it was a ridiculous game of football.
Yeah, very much so. I think for me personally, I love a manager who is stubborn in their ways and has full belief that what they do, how they play works. But at some point, when a game has extra extraordinary circumstances, you have to you have to concede. If your team are down to 9 players, I think at that point you have to go, okay, well, the way I play just isn't going to work. And obviously it did, and stuck to his guns, and it did not work. They lost the game quite badly. But I think I love a manager who's stubborn. I understand why you want to stick to your tactics, but when it goes so horribly wrong, when you're in such a unheard of scenario, I think you have to adjust. You have to change.
Yeah, I thought the discourse was really interesting in the immediate aftermath of that game, and I think that we've got to remember they were 1-0 up when they went down to 10 players. Of course, the second red card led to the penalty, which was converted, and then they ended up, after that. But it was still 1-1 at half-time, I believe, and then they went on to concede more in the second half. So it's not like that game wasn't salvageable. And the discourse after the game was a lot of people saying that they admired Postecoglou's bravery and the fact he stuck to his guns and all that, and the other half was saying, well, there was a result on the table there. If we'd have calmed it down, if we'd have played normally, if we'd have gone super defensive, maybe we could have held on to it, maybe we could have salvaged a point at least. So I think in that regard there was a lot of interesting discussions around that game from the perspective of Tottenham fans, a lot of people criticising or agreeing with Ange Postecoglou. But Postecoglou has always been very outspoken, and you can see he has a very clear worldview and philosophy and understanding of how things work, and we see that in his press conferences. He's very open and honest about that, which I think can be to both his positive and to his detriment. I think it can be, it can go both ways there. But we saw it there. We saw Postecoglou play this very aggressive system. His system is inherently very aggressive. Yeah. And actually a big discussion is whether his football is too idealistic within itself, because they rely too heavily on oppositions not understanding it. And as we saw in those first 10 games of last season, it worked out really nicely because teams didn't know how to handle the 2 midfielders inverting into almost attacking midfield roles, and that will create huge overloads, and they've thrived on that. But since then, since teams have started to work out what Tottenham are doing, it's not been as effective, and actually they are very, very vulnerable to transitions, especially when you have a centre-half in Romero who jumps onto players very quickly and is a bit rash. So I do think you have a bit of an issue there, but overall his tactics were very interesting. I do think it's a bit too idealistic.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it's one of those where you simply, some of it comes down to experience as well. If you look where Postecoglou managed previously before Tottenham, Celtic, you can guarantee that no one in Scotland is understanding the way he plays.
But even if you can, they perhaps don't have the resources to challenge in a different way.
It's one of those where yes, he did well at Celtic, but realistically everyone does well at Celtic unless you do something monumentally terrible. But when it comes to Tottenham, when you come to the Premier League, you can't bargain on the fact that people won't know what you're doing, because they eventually will, because they're the best managers in the world. And then when they realise what you're doing, you just go, oh well, we will keep doing it and hope they forget. I think that's the problem. I think there isn't a clear plan. When he sticks to his guns, when he is so idealistic, it doesn't. I don't see why. I mean, I get why in terms of he backs his own tactic, but he will know that other teams can understand it. He knows that Tottenham are being read like a book at the moment. So I question where his plan is to try keep playing the same way, because it's not going to work. That teams aren't suddenly going to go, oh, well, I don't know how Tottenham play anymore after they've learnt it. So it just feels like they're banging their head against a brick wall whenever they play Tottenham.
Yeah, and let's look at some less absurd examples, because obviously that game against Chelsea was quite an extraordinary one. From this season, I think a lot of the frustration with Ange Postecoglou, not only has it been tactically, but it's also been with his substitutions. Because what you can see in games is that he is very reactive rather than proactive. And so what ends up happening is that he waits till Tottenham concede, he waits till it all goes wrong, and then makes the changes. Yeah. Or actually, if you're a bit more proactive, if you read what's happening in the game, then you can fix and adapt to that before your team ends up conceding a goal. And I do think he waits a little bit too long to make those substitutions, and they don't really have time to have an impact on the game. But because again, it comes back to that idealism, it comes back to that stubbornness, because he wants to keep the 11 on the field, because he believes this is the 11 that he thinks is best equipped for that game. So making changes doesn't make much sense if you fully believe that 11 should be winning that game. But yeah, too many times it just isn't working at the moment. I also think he was, the recruitment this summer was a little bit odd considering how they play, because they were chasing Pedro Neto, who I think would have been a perfect winger for Postecoglou's system. He likes those out-and-out wingers. And yet they didn't sign Pedro Neto, and instead they went for Wilson Odobert, who isn't really the same profile, definitely isn't Premier League ready, as in like top level Premier League ready. I know he played Premier League football with Burnley last season. Even then, he hardly set the world alight. I think there's a lot of potential there, but it's a sign that doesn't really make much sense. And then you've got Brennan Johnson, who caught a lot of flack in the North London derby, unfairly so, I think, from Tottenham fans. You could see how emotional he was in the game since then, because he scored and he didn't want to go over to the fans and stuff like that. So you can see how that affected him. And I think he's a top player, but a bit of competition there would have been nice. You have so many players in the Tottenham squad that just don't quite fit what Ange wants. And they're players that have been brought in under Ange. And so you've got to question who's making these calls and where is the logic behind them. Dominic Solanke's one for me that doesn't make any sense. So this is what you can sort of support Ange in that regard, because Solanke makes absolutely no sense for a Postecoglou system. You look at the strikers that he's wanted to use in that role, and Solanke just isn't the same mould. I think that a much better option could have been John Duran. I think Duran would have been a much better option, or Ivan Toney, who ended up going to Saudi Arabia. I think they would have been better fits. The Solanke one for me, very good finisher, very good poacher, but he just doesn't really work in this Tottenham system. Great presser though, so that is one thing that I think Postecoglou will use more effectively once he's actually playing regularly. He's been injured for most of the start of the season, but very reactive with those substitutions. So the question is, can Ange become pragmatic then?
I think so. I think you always can, because as we were saying, I feel the problem that what's happening at the moment is that overall in each sector, whether it's recruitment, whether it's on the pitch, there's just mistakes being made, and you have to adjust those mistakes. And I think he will, and I think hopefully those mistakes in terms of on and off the pitch will make him change, because if he doesn't, Tottenham are going to be in a very, very bad situation. The results at the start of the season, the performances, he can't see those and keep going the way he is, because he'll end out the door. So realistically, I definitely think that he can change, and I think hopefully for Tottenham's sake, he will realise that he can't just keep backing his own idea, and that he is going to have to adapt something to keep Tottenham where they are in the Premier League.
Yeah, I think what's got to be considered is that Ange is a relatively young manager. I know obviously he's in his 50s, he doesn't particularly look like a young and upcoming manager, but when you consider he's not been managing for very long. I think it's about 10 years now, which in the management game isn't all that long. You consider Guardiola now, who's someone who is a peer of his, someone he should be competing against, and you think, well, his first role in coaching or in professional management was in 2008 now. So that's a very long time ago. That's over, 16 years?
16 years, yeah.
So it has just got that advantage on Postecoglou. You've got to consider that people like Guardiola came in at Barcelona. Postecoglou's never had a role like this Tottenham position before. Even Celtic, Yokohama F. Marinos, yes, they're professional football, yes, they're top-level football, but it's not the same as managing in the Premier League. It's not the same as managing in one of the top 5 leagues. So when you go, well, because it feels like every team in the Premier League right now is on their path to Guardiola. It's because obviously he is the staple, he's the top of the mountain, isn't he? Guardiola, he's what everyone aspires to be. And it just feels like every team in the Prem is searching for their Guardiola. And the question for Tottenham with Ange Postecoglou is, he's not there yet, but will he become there? Will he get to that Guardiola level? Or are they better off punting on someone else, like every other team is doing right now? You look at Arsenal, they punted on Arteta, and he's now pretty close to the top of that mountain.
Yeah.
You look at Chelsea, and they're trying to do the same thing. They've gone Maresca, thinking, you know what, he might be able to get us up the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
Liverpool probably doing the same now with Klopp. Klopp came close. Well, Klopp arguably was up there, just a different mountain. Now they're on their road to Guardiola mountain, and they've got Arne Slot. So it feels like everyone's trending that direction. The question for Tottenham is, will Ange Postecoglou become Pep Guardiola? Will he go bald?
Maybe.
That's the big question.
I think that's the thing. I think, to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I like Ange. And obviously Tottenham, labelled it Ange Ball. They sing his name to the angels.
It's a very distinctive style, isn't it?
It is. And I like that because, as you say, there are so many teams in the Premier League who are going to that very similar Pep Guardiola. And I like Ange. I like, and I like the traditional managers, your Sean Dyche and co. But as you can see right now, they are not working. Because the two people I've named there at Everton and Tottenham, it's not working.
Both below where they should be in the table. Yeah.
And it's one of those where, as much as everyone playing like Pep is perhaps not as interesting and you like to have difference, realistically, if you want results and you want performances, I think you have got to go that direction. And it's going to come down to Ange to whether he can take himself in that direction or whether Tottenham will have to find a new man to take them in that direction. Because I think I rate Ange Postecoglou's stubbornness. I like the fact that he likes to believe in what he's made and how he thinks. But at the end of the day, sometimes you have to realise that someone else has already done it and they are doing it better. So you've got to do it like they are. Because if not, you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, fair enough. I think the other question is, does he need to become pragmatic to be an elite manager? If he wants to be at that top level, does he have to be pragmatic or can he do it?
I think you do. I think you have to be pragmatic to be at the top level. Realistically, if you want to compete for elite competitions, if you want to win trophies, you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to change because, if you go on a cup run, or Champions League's probably better because you're not playing everyone in Premier. By the time you get to the quarters or the semis, there will be teams that have worked you out, and then you won't, and then you'll get knocked out. So I think especially, and this is the thing we've seen with Tottenham, is they have struggled in knockout games. Even Coventry a few weeks back was a very, very difficult game. They nearly lost that. But there's Tottenham won trophies, and I don't think they will under Ange because in knockout football, you need to have that manager who's going to adapt, who's going to change to make sure you win the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I like Ange's comments this season about how he's always won something in his second season, and that's actually evidence for the contrary because he has been successful. He won titles at Celtic. He won titles in Japan with Yokohama F. Marinos. He won titles in the A-League. And I know they're not equivalent competitions. And I don't think Tottenham relatively are the same. If you consider the other clubs he's managed at, they're in the top 2-3 clubs. Tottenham aren't that. Because right now there's so many teams ahead of him. I'd put Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool comfortably ahead of them. I'd probably say Aston Villa right now are ahead of them. I would say Chelsea, based on how they've started this season, are ahead of them. And so you're already looking at 5 teams there, and that's without even considering Newcastle, who've already beaten Tottenham this season. So over one match, they've shown they can beat Tottenham, so you should put them ahead of them. I think the big question mark there is can he actually... Would he... I think... The thing is, he would win something if there was less... I think he would win a domestic trophy if there was less competition. There's just so many good teams, and because they can beat the smaller sides in the league, or they should beat the smaller sides in the league more often than they don't, they do slip up too often. But the issue is there's so much competition in the Premier League. There are so many good teams. The top 10 could all be in a different order, and it would look normal, bar probably City and Arsenal right now. So it is very difficult to be successful in the Premier League, and actually the way Tottenham are trying to go about it by trusting in Ange Postecoglou, by developing in the youth, it's going to be interesting to see if it works. Yeah. But you can see the thinking there because you can't go and spend the same amount of money that City and Arsenal do and hope it works overnight because it won't. Arsenal took very long to get from Arteta. If you remember Arteta when he first joined Arsenal and how terrible they were, and he was on the brink of the sack, but they trusted him and they believed in him, and he developed pragmatism. You look at the most recent game for Arsenal against Manchester City where they played an absurd 5-4 formation, 4-5. It was so compact, so narrow.
Exactly.
And that's completely different to how Arteta plays. Now, the key thing is, Postecoglou, yes, he hasn't got there yet, but I think if you give him to the end of the season, see where he's at. Has he shown that he can be pragmatic? Is what he's saying in the media showing that he will be less stubborn? then I think give him time. The issue is if he doesn't show a willingness to adapt, you're going to still have the situation where Tottenham can't change games. So if they don't win it from minute one, they don't really have a chance of changing the match. So it's going to be interesting to see. They've got Manchester United this weekend, which I think is going to be a truly riveting game because I think United are one of the worst teams in the Premier League. And you've got a team that are stubbornly coached versus a team who aren't coached at all. So it's at opposite ends of the spectrum. One team that originated in this very set structure, very set system, who understand their roles but sometimes doesn't work, against a Manchester United side who... It is impossible to know what they're going to try and do on any given day of the week. So, how do you prepare for that?
But that's the thing. I think it favours United because there's one thing we know about United. It's that Ten Hag can set them up for one game,
can coach games
and because they know how Tottenham are going to play, they can manage this one game against Tottenham, which could leave Tottenham in big trouble. If they lose to Man United, that is a huge saying. That is a massive statement, and it is not a good statement for Tottenham.
No, I will caveat that with, though, they knew how Crystal Palace were going to play, and they still couldn't beat them.
They did, and that is true. But for Tottenham, I think they've got to start to... For me, the proof's there. Trophies can be won. Newcastle have got to a Carabao Cup final. Chelsea, despite all the crap going on there, got to back-to-back finals. It's one of those where Tottenham can definitely win trophies here, and they've got to start delivering.
Yeah, definitely. I think in Europe, obviously, they got Europe this year. I forget.
No, they haven't.
They don't because it was because Man United won the. Newcastle didn't get Europe. Tottenham did.
Did they? Oh yeah.
Tottenham have Europa League. So
honestly,
is that a competition they can win?
No.
Possibly.
No, they won't be near it.
No?
That's the problem. They should be. They should be.
But I do think Europa League is more winnable now that teams don't get knocked down from the Champions League.
Potentially.
When you consider the rivals for the Europa League from England are Manchester United, who aren't winning the Europa League this year.
That's true.
When you consider that you can't get someone like Barcelona knocked down from the Champions League, I think there is a chance. But again, as you say, to win knockout competitions, you've got to be pragmatic because you can't just rely on being the best team. If teams come up and set up well, you've got to have options to try and do something different, try and beat them in a different way. So I think he's got to develop that pragmatism, Postecoglou. But I think he's a very good... Everything he says in the media is very good. I think he's very personable. Clearly the players buy into what he's trying to do. I think until recently, most of the fans have been on his side. I think now he's starting to get fans on his back because they're losing games, because the summer transfer window perhaps didn't go how they wanted it to. And so I think they've got to start winning soon, not because they're in any sort of danger of, obviously they're 11th in the Premier League right now. It's hardly perfect, but they're not in any danger of going down. But they have got to be mindful Postecoglou's got to be mindful that the fans are growing tired, they are growing frustrated. So that's something that's got to change. But I don't think everything's too bad for Tottenham. Obviously, Solanke's been out for the first few games this season. I think once he's back, they probably look a little bit better. I thought James Maddison's he's second for expected goal involvements, which is the highest, other than Erling Haaland, it's the highest in the Premier League. But we don't count Haaland anymore. So... He's doing really well. If players can start finishing off their chances and he starts getting goals and assists, they look really good. So I don't think it's all panic stations just yet for Tottenham. The Manchester United game is the kind of game where they could turn up and make a real statement. We say United can make a statement by beating them, but Tottenham can make an equally strong statement by beating Manchester United, especially if you get United on a bad day and you put a few past them. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I do think the ceiling is there for Postecoglou if he can continue to grow and if he can become a bit more pragmatic. But that is everything from us today. If you have enjoyed this video, then make sure to go check out the one on screen now. That's our weekly news where we talk about the news, surprisingly. So go and check that out. We spoke about Arsenal, we spoke about Nicholas Jackson, and spoke about why Lisandro Martinez should be arrested. That is everything though from today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.